The last official day in the meantime for schools in South Africa, and we're focusing on various topics around education throughout our programming today. One of the challenges facing corporates is that graduates are not work ready, and I caught up with John Botha, who's Executive Director of Strategy at Production Management Institute, and spoke to him about the education system.
Absolutely, and it's been for some time. I think the fact that it's been centralised under Minister Nzimande, where we now have an opportunity to align primary, secondary and tertiary education. But I think that time is running out and we need to move more quickly.
Of course, there's a difference between education, so conferred qualifications, and then skills apt for a specific job. And that's a distinction that we probably need to highlight, perhaps more so than we have in the past, because while there are large numbers of vacancies, in higher skilled jobs, it doesn't make sense that there are just as high numbers of unemployed graduates.
Correct. Yes, absolutely. The reality is that the economic and financial crisis has highlighted the need for companies to have employees who are productive from day one. And the productivity wage gap that we continuously trying to address is a major issue, because companies can't afford to have 6 to 12 months lapses before employees become fully productive, yet they're paying, especially graduates, higher wages. So there seems to be a bridging requirement, or certainly a gap, that needs to be filled when we're looking at pure academic versus readiness for the world of work.
What the situation seems to have sprouted is the necessity for Business South Africa to go down this route alone, to train for its own needs due to the lack of work-ready graduates that are out there. How viable an avenue is this?
It's a very viable avenue for providers that are appropriate and that understand the labour market needs to get involved in that space. And I think the mushrooming of business schools as part of the pure academic institution, its value proposition is testimony to the fact that an academic conferring of qualifications alone is not going to be sufficient going forwards. The other issue is also the quality or the type of degree that's being conferred. If we look at high growth areas such as India, more than half of their graduates are science, engineering and technology graduates, whereas in South Africa it's 20%. So we also have to redirect the allocation of resources in appropriate areas.
We've seen quite a few businesses go down that route. I mean, we've had Standard Bank's Global Leadership Centre, Tiger Brands Trading Academy, the Altech Academy as well. Just how much success have these initiatives boasted so far?
I think the success, it's definitely an improvement on what's been coming out of the academic institutions per se. But in these company-based academies, we have our own challenges. AdCorp's also had its recent AdCorp Leadership Academy launched. And in even partnering with academic institutions, we've found that there's a lack of understanding of what business needs really are, which has been pretty frustrating. So what we really find is in many of these modules and engagements, we've had to bring subject matter experts in from business to complement the academic institutions' expertise.
It's interesting because academics may say that this forms part of on-the-job training, that higher education merely sets a foundation and engenders a certain discipline when it comes to your workforce, and the onus is on business to then develop that further. What's your response to that kind of commentary?
I think there's a shared responsibility, and I think academic institutions are shirking that. Just as an example, you've got people coming out of universities with a BCom honours degree, may be specialising in labour relations or labour law. They've learnt about labour law and fairness and dismissal requirements, but they've never actually observed nor engaged in a disciplinary inquiry. So you've got this highly paid graduate who's of no use to man or beast when they arrive at the workplace. Because they haven't actually applied those skills in a work environment. And
it's only when they're on the job that companies then, realize that those skills sets are inadequate for the job at hand. Let's take a look at the regulatory environment then, because you're currently sitting with NEDLAC and you're reworking and amending regulations within that labour industry. What progress are we seeing? Are we seeing significant enough progress?
I don't believe we are. Labour market policy really needs to look at the introduction of people into the labour market. And I referred earlier to the productivity wage gap issue. Now we have the youth unemployment subsidy, for example, which Treasury are trying to push. And we find trade unions are very opposed to the principle of youth employment subsidies, because they're concerned that it just creates a second tier of low-paid workers and results in your older employees getting retrenched potentially. But I think it's concerning that there isn't enough of an emphasis and a will to engage in those particular areas.
Mm-hmm. So we've got that kind of stride being made on that, on that level on a regulatory basis. What kind of stride are we seeing education departments make? Relooking at what education is given, because you alluded to earlier, that lack of general relevance of higher education that's out there currently, and so change is something surely we need to see on a curriculum and a syllabi basis.
Yeah, we're very concerned, quite frankly, as business, because of the slow change of pace of change taking place. I mean, for example, there's so many funds, the quantum of funds tied up at the NSF, at the Development Bank, all these job creation funds and skills funding and CETA funds. And what we find is the bottleneck in getting those funds issued and allocated to stakeholders is a major, major problem. And of course, the CETAs are supposed to be the institutions that are addressing job-specific and labour market, business-specific training needs, because they get skills plans that indicate the demand for skills over the next 12 months, and then they're supposed to obviously bring providers in to match supply and demand. But unfortunately, the huge quantum of funds available is not being dispersed and allocated appropriately and timeously enough, and it's a major challenge for business. And part of that is curriculum design and accreditation, because those funds have to be allocated in the correct areas.
Absolutely. So to end off with, John, I mean, what models should and could higher education facilities in South Africa actually draw from?
I think, again, I think their input has to be labour market relevant. So they've got to form proper stakeholder networks, they've got to have broader governance bases. When they design curricula, they need more inclusive stakeholders in doing that. But I think fundamentally, we've got to start at a school level. We've got to see what an individual's talents are, what they've been blessed with in terms of their strengths. We've got to identify that, and then we've got to steer them in a particular direction that's appropriate. And I think that's where, in the value chain, we come in too late.